Now we're going to move on to our keynote speaker this morning. He is one of the most influential figures in policing in England and Wales, former Merseyside Chief Constable, and since last year, the head of the policing watchdog, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services, also known as HMIC FRS. Please welcome Andy Cooke.
Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the invite to come and talk at what is an exceptionally important part of policing. And Jonathan enjoyed the talk. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll come back to the point Jonathan made, Jordan, that of making a difference and the importance of that for each and every one of us. But today I wanted to address three questions. The first, what is the value of diversion from prosecution? The second, how well is diversion being used now? And thirdly, what action can be taken to create a better future? In 1951, Sir Hartley Shawcross, who was then Attorney General, stated it had never been the rule in this country, I hope it never will be, that suspected criminal offences must automatically be the subject of prosecution. He said there should only be a prosecution wherever it appears in the public interest. And there are two distinct problems when acting in the public interest against those who have committed a crime. The first problem is prevention. We want to prevent crime from happening in the future by reducing the risk of offending posed by that individual. And we want to create an effective deterrent for others. The second one is the problem of delivering justice. We want an outcome where both the offender and victim have received what they deserve. To effectively tackle these problems, we must follow what works according to the evidence. To reduce the risk of offending posed by that individual, we can remove offenders from society by placing them in prison. Doing so is undoubtedly a suitable solution where the threat is so severe that nothing else will suffice. And some people just deserve to be in prison. But locking people away is an extreme step, both in terms of liberty and in the high cost to the public purse. The decision to do this must be proportionate to the risk they present and the seriousness of that offence. And consideration must be given to what comes afterwards. Unless we place the offender in prison for the rest of their life, there must be a clear path to rehabilitation. Sadly, our criminal justice system is not very good at this. In the UK, excluding data from during the COVID pandemic, around 30% of prison inmates reoffend within 12 months of release, and 75% within 9 years. It also seems that time spent in prison can increase the likelihood of future offending for some, especially juveniles and first-time offenders. An example, cause of this is organised criminals in prison drawing others into crime. For offending where the seriousness and risk is low and a prison sentence would be short if given at all, diversion and out-of-court disposals are a better way to reduce the threat posed by an individual. This is because the evidence suggests that these interventions reduce the risk of reoffending more than the judicial system does for adults and even more so for children. We seek to create a deterrent for others who would commit a crime. So do long prison sentences cause a deterrent effect? It's a complex topic which I know divides opinions. It's impossible to give that definitive answer, but the research would suggest not. Prison sentences have little impact on crime after a certain length. One reason is that, as a species, we don't properly consider the future or understand the implications of our actions. Many of those who commit crimes seem even less disposed to value in the future than those who don't commit crimes, meaning long sentences can seem arbitrary and irrelevant. Another critical reason is that people who commit crime often think they're unlikely to be caught and even less likely to face prison. So keeping people locked up for longer for lower level offences, like the approach taken in the United States, is neither a legitimate nor efficient means of creating this deterrent. What does work to create a deterrent is the speedy and certainty of action following a criminal act. But we have a criminal justice system where people really are unlikely to be caught. And even if they are, there are severe delays before their day in court. Do out-of-court disposals create a deterrent effect? This again divides opinion, but they do effectively increase the certainty and speed of action. They are also substantially cheaper to administer per crime, something we should pay attention to in a system operating under financial pressure and with significant delays. Their use gives the criminal justice system more time and money to focus on serious offending. For example, in 2011, youth offending taken through the court system took 96 days from offence to completion. In 2021, that figure was 218 days. Therefore, I believe diversion and out-of-court disposals play a crucial role in creating an effective deterrent against crime. The last outcome the system is trying to achieve is justice for victims and communities. We have a sense of fairness built into human nature. We want to see either retribution, the punishment of those who have caused them, or reparations made to counterbalance the damage caused. The criminal justice system achieves this outcome when it works as intended, but so can diversion and out-of-court disposals. Analysis shows that victims have compatible levels of satisfaction with both. Out of court is not the soft option as sometimes portrayed, particularly for children who work with youth justice services, enabling them to improve their lives. Many people who start on a path towards crime are not necessarily bad or evil. It is the classic nature versus nurture argument. I very much believe that most people do not start off in life wishing to do wrong or cause harm, but they are misguided by their circumstances and by their environment. That may be poor parenting, adverse childhood experiences such as witnessing domestic abuse, poverty, neurodivergent conditions such as ADHD or mental health issues. It's therefore clear that diversion and out-of-court disposals are essential elements of an effective criminal justice system. If used in the right circumstances, they can reduce the risk of reoffending, provide a deterrent, and create a sense of justice. So, how well are they being used? The police have an opportunity to use them more. There's been a drop in usage, which forms part of a broader drop in positive outcomes across England and Wales over the last years. Diversion and out-of-court disposals are essential, but so is charging those who commit more serious crimes. The outcome figures for the year to June 2022 show that charges were 5.4%, out-of-court disposals 3.5%, and diversion 0.6% of all outcomes. In 2014-15, charge rates alone were over 15%. For out-of-court disposals, HMIC FRS, then HMIC, took part in a criminal justice joint inspection in 2011, looking at out-of-court disposals. And back then, out-of-court disposals made up around 500,000 criminal justice outcomes, more than twice the 221,000 times they were used last year. At the time, we noted the preceding rise in their use. I'm now commenting on their decline. The diversionary outcome 22, was introduced in April 2019 following the landmark Lammy report. The police use it where diversionary, educational or intervention activity has been undertaken and it's not in the public interest to take further action. But it is not being used to its full potential at only 0.6% of all outcomes. The police need to use them more consistently. Those countrywide figures had a lot of local variation. In 2011, our inspection found the use of out-of-court disposals varied considerably between forces. We also had concerns about decision-making and inappropriate use. This variation is still the case for both children and adults. For children in 2019, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Probation, Justin Russell, reported that there needs to be less variation in police and youth offending teams and on their decisions on whether a child should receive an out-of-court disposal or be charged with an offence. Some were too punitive, while others were too lenient or inconsistent. There was, in effect, a postcode lottery for children. And for adults, there are still 6 options available to forces, which have developed organically and are used to varying degrees. I'm pleased that government reform is underway to bring research-backed changes to this through the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022, and it will introduce a new 2-tiered approach of community caution and diversionary caution. And the Magistrates Association has recently commented on the use of out-of-court disposals ahead of the implementation of this legislation. It said they have been expanding haphazardly, resulting in a troubling and largely unchecked transfer of powers from the courts to the police. It also cited concerning circumstances in which they had used them. And we looked at Outcome 22 during our most recent peel inspections. Again, in this area, we found too much variation. We also found some common failings. These include a lack of victim consultation, insufficient detail of what activity will be undertaken, no confirmation that it's been undertaken before closure, and a lack of supervisory oversight. So where do we go from here? We know that diversion and out-of-court disposals work, but it's clear the police could use them more and use them more effectively. You'll hear from many subject matter experts today about their views on what action should be taken. But I'd like to offer you just a few of my thoughts. Firstly, prevention must be taken seriously. By the time we reach diversion and out-of-court disposals, it's already fairly demand where social dysfunction has occurred. I was quoted in The Guardian last year saying if I had £5 billion of public money to spend, I'd put 20% on policing and 80% on cutting poverty and improving opportunity. And I genuinely believe this approach is the best way to prevent crime. Police forces must focus on neighbourhood policing and effective problem solving. The government and broader system must focus on reducing poverty, dealing with child maltreatment, improving education and health, and creating equal opportunities for everyone. And when a crime does occur, the police need to get the basics right. If they don't figure out who has committed the crime, there is no avenue for action, diversion, out-of-court disposals or charge. In our inspections over the last 18 months, we've found an inexperienced workforce who frequently miss opportunities to identify offenders by failing in the basics, such as checking CCTV. And decision-making must improve. Once the offender has been identified and sufficient evidence gathered, the decision-making of the police and youth justice services needs to improve. Decision-making is a complex issue which is partly related to culture and awareness and partly related to skills, process and guidance. The critical question we left open in our 2011 report was where the boundaries should lie between out-of-court disposals and prosecution before a court. This question still needs to be resolved. However, I'm clear there's an opportunity to use diversion and out-of-court disposals more. There should also be more consistency, including not using them for serious and repeat offending. Lastly, we must continue expanding the evidence base of what works and build this into practice. We can only follow the evidence where it exists, so we need more research conducted in our own country. It must cover the decision to use diversion and what interventions we should make. I welcome the government's announcement last May of a new study on how the police use out-of-court disposals to support adults with mental health and other health-related vulnerabilities. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. We still have an awful lot to learn. I hope the talk today has convinced you of the value of diversion and out-of-court disposals, and I am a big supporter. I hope it's shown you how they're not being used enough or consistently enough, and given you some insight into what should be done to address these challenges. And as Jonathan was saying, conferences like this are instrumental and thought-provoking, but they must result in action. Only through action will we overcome the challenges of today and create that better future. It can seem daunting or even pointless at times if you feel as though you are a small cog in a big machine. But this is simply not true. Change happens one person at a time. After you've enjoyed the conference today, and I'm sure you will, I urge you to go back to your organisation thinking about what action you can take tomorrow. Thank you.
Andy, thank you very much. A very thought-provoking, comprehensive speech, and you've agreed to stay on for 10 minutes to take some questions using the Slido app. The code slido.com, hashtag 5565285, or stick your hand up and someone with a microphone will come round. We've got some hands going up there, gentlemen over there. If we can get a microphone to him, please. Right at the back. And then we've got another lady over there. This gentleman over there, thank you very much.
Sorry for causing the walk. Alex Stevens from the University of Kent. I'm really interested in your comments about the role of reducing poverty and promoting equal opportunity as crime reduction. And I just wondered if you could say more about the role of police in doing that.
I think it's a very difficult topic, this, because the reason I said I'd put 2 billion into policing and the rest into other parts of the social infrastructure was because policing's mission is too large as it is. So policing cannot be omnicompetent and a specialist at everything it looks at. So for me, the mission of policing needs to be drawn back into what the police should be doing and away from some of the issues that we're seeing policing involved in, like mental health. Sometimes it needs to be involved in mental health, but not to the extent that it is. A lot of the bureaucracy that sits around it needs to be withdrawn. But other agencies need to step up and take responsibility for a lot of things that policing are doing, because policing has become, on occasion, the first, last and only resort for a lot of people who are in crisis and a lot of people who need help within communities. And that is not right. It's unfair on policing because of the reputation that policing gets, but it's also unfair on those people who need help within our societies. I know, despite the best interest and no matter how compassionate they are, if one of my children had a mental health issue, a significant mental health issue, I don't particularly want 2 police officers dealing with that. I want a mental health professional. And if my child went missing and we needed to know exactly where they'd been, what the situation was, etc., there are better people sometimes than a response officer to ask those questions. So we need to be looking really at what policing should be doing in relation to this piece of work. Now, it should have a very large part in diversionary activity, but not necessarily running the diversionary activity, but funneling people into that sort of activity. Other agencies are better placed and more professional. We just heard from Jonathan, a specialist in this field. Quite rightly, whatever we do in this field, it shouldn't be a tick box activity. It's got to matter, it's got to actually make a difference. And it's not just got to be, we'll tick that outcome off now, and that can be outcome 21, 22, whatever it's going to be. If we're not making a difference with it, it's pointless. Okay, it's just adding to figures. And that doesn't improve society. So policing's role should be a crucial role, but it's not responsible for all this. It's one part in what should be a wider cargo of professional people coming together to make a difference.
Thank you. We've got a lady over here, please, with another question.
Hello, Roisin from Sussex Police. My question is, what levers do the HMICR, the FRS, have to bring this further up the agenda for our chief officers, but also for those partner agencies and other bodies who we want to funnel our offenders into?
Well done on getting the name right. It's a ridiculously long title, I accept that, but it wasn't our choice. What levers do we have? Firstly, within policing, obviously, Chief Constables listen to what the Inspectorate says, because it's not in their interest not to. We're not a regulator, we can't make anybody do anything, but forces do take our recommendations on board, because at times people's roles, jobs, etc. depend on those reports that come through. We are doing an awful lot more work at the moment about outcomes across the board, because outcomes are ridiculously low, whichever way, whether that's out of court, whether that's charges, it is not good enough. And I say that as an ex-Chief Constable, it's not good enough. So we'll be looking at this part of business in more detail moving forward. And on a wider sphere as well, I do joint inspections with probation, Chief Inspector of Probation, CPS, and a few others, which one I'm standing up here, I can't remember. But there are a number of us who come together regularly and do joint inspections across the whole framework of criminal justice and wider, prisons, etc., etc. And some of those inspections are quite incisive inspections. This is a really good place to look at on a wider basis about the whole reoffending piece, together with prisoners, together with probation, together with CPS and myself, to make sure that we're all lined up together to make a difference around this. So that will form part of our work that we're doing over the next couple of years.
Thank you. We've got some questions on Slido. Try and deal with them reasonably quickly. What can be done to strip out the bureaucracy of the Home Office counting rules that skew data and create barriers to common sense decisions and the use of out-of-court disposals? Briefly, if you can, Andy.
Yeah, briefly, I know we all love the Home Office counting rules. I am unfortunately the arbiter of them. The good news is the Police Minister, Minister Phipps, has listened, and there's an awful lot of work going on at the moment about redefining those Home Office counting rules, making them more simple, looking both at the outcomes and what is recorded in the first place. There's a piece of work that will be reporting by April on a first tranche of work and a second tranche of work to report the following April, which should make Home Office counting rules far more simple and far more effective and less of a ridiculous bureaucracy.
That's good to hear. How can the performance framework for policing better support the use of outcome 22?
Sorry, Danny, give me that one again, please.
Yeah. How can the performance framework for policing better support the use of outcome 22? It's currently not a positive outcome which can act as a barrier to its use.
Yeah, it's not. And I think it's how effective 22 is, more than making it a sort of positive outcome, because we've got 20-something positive outcomes already. It's important, though, and it's important that it's got a place to play in the wider approach to actually reducing reoffending. So I wouldn't commit to saying it should be a positive outcome, listed as a positive outcome, because I do want those number of positive outcomes reduced, not increased. There's too many already.
Lots more questions. I'm just having to pick up some. There's one question I'm sure a lot of people in the room will be asking this, slightly away from our topic, but were you shocked by the revelations about the Met Officer David Carrick this week and what should be done? Slightly off topic, but I think a lot of people will be interested for your opinions on that.
Okay, I was at the Home Affairs Collective Committee yesterday where I was grilled in relation to this question. So please, apologies if there's a bit of fatigue. But quite simply, disgusted. Shocking isn't a strong enough word in relation to it. Absolutely disgusted by the actions of someone who wore a police uniform and who shamed the whole of the police service as a result of their actions in doing so. Sadly, not the first issue we've seen of such magnitude over the last couple of years. And it's not just down to one police force, it is wider than that. Cultures need to change, approaches need to change, mindsets need to change, leadership needs to improve, and we need to actually get these people out of policing, because I am so proud that I spent 36 years as a police officer, and I am so disgusted when people like this are identified. They've got to be identified before they come into the job. Not always possible, but once they're in the job, all of us, need to be identifying them and getting them out as quickly as possible, because that besmirches the vastly outstanding work that goes on right across this country on a daily basis by police officers, both compassionate, brave, professional, but people don't see that. They just see the headline of this, I'll be careful what words I use, of this individual who has done what he's done, which is just an absolute disgrace. We've done an inspection on vetting, misogyny and counter-corruption last year, the end of last year, which identified a number of the issues where policing was failing to identify these individuals, where the vetting wasn't right and wasn't strong enough. I'm not going to say I told you so, because these things have been going on for longer than that, and we need all, as a police system, needs to be better at stopping it happening. But we can't afford as policing to maintain the trust and confidence of communities whilst these individuals still wear a police uniform.
Thank you for that answer, Andy. And just coming back to topic, I mean, with that in mind, and with so many other issues affecting public confidence. How do we then focus people's attention? This is an anonymous question. How do we focus people's attention on the benefits of out-of-court disposals with all those other priorities and issues that you have to deal with?
It's always difficult. You know, there's no magic wand to make that the case. Policing has an awful lot of priorities, and politicians are very good at giving policing priorities, but not taking them away. What we need to do in order to start seeing the wheat from the chaff is very much strip away a lot of the things that policing doesn't need to do that it's doing at the moment, to allow it more time to do what it should be doing, which is preventing reoffending, prevention, catching the bad people, and making sure our part in the system is professionally done. We need to strip out a lot of the stuff we're doing around mental health. Again, I'm going to stand in and I'm going to praise the Minister in relation to this. He's already started a series of work off with the Mental Health Minister and the Department of Health to reduce the time that police officers spend dealing with mental health issues. Similarly, he started work on Home Office counter-news, as I've said, and similarly, there is also other work going on around DG6 and the issues around the bureaucracy that surrounds policing and the CPS. So those issues he's working towards. Once policing has more time to focus on what's important, we should see more time spent addressing issues like out-of-court disposals.
Andy, thank you very much. We've got more questions, but time is up. Thank you very much indeed. Please show your appreciation. Thanks, Andy. Cheers. All the best.